PEMCAST.
Hello! Today we have Heymin, Jeong with us. If you kind of want to give a little intro about yourself, some things maybe you can share with us, your current life stage, where you went to school, and maybe some of your hobbies.
Okay, so my name is Heymin. I am 25 years old, and I just recently graduated from the pharmacy program at Rutgers this past May, or actually May of 2022. And I am currently looking for a job. So if anyone is, looking to hire me, hit me up. And some of my hobbies are, I love basketball. I like playing board games. I just like games in general, I think. And I love children's ministry.
Aww.
Yeah.
I should have introduced you as Dr. Jeong then.
No.
But congrats on graduating
Thank
from
you.
pharm school. I know that must have been a long 6 years. Okay, and I know that you've actually been at Praise for quite some time. I think I knew you since youth group, actually.
Yeah.
So you want to share with us a little bit about how you, kind of like your history with PEM and your involvement within the church?
Yeah, so I've been at the Praise Presbyterian Church since I was in 5th grade. I was in Tennessee before that, but I didn't attend PEM until I graduated high school. So I've been at PEM for 7 years now, and I would say the majority of my time at PEM has been with the welcoming team and also with Emmaus. I think it started both in the summer after my freshman year of college. I just remember Baladin coming up to me and asking me to just join welcoming. And I remember when I first came out to PEM, how welcoming everyone was and how important that was to me into getting integrated into the church community, because previously I had felt a bit estranged from my past church community. So it was really nice just to come into a community that's so God-loving and also loving to everyone around them. And so I wanted to also share that sort of love by being part of the welcoming team. And then with Emmaus too, I have such a big heart because I was going through college at the same time, and we just started Emmaus, and I was just really blessed to have been asked to be on the leadership team to begin with by Pastor Paul. And so I think just seeing Emmaus grow, especially through P. Danny's leadership, has been awesome to see.
Amazing. Yeah, if our listeners don't know, Heymin recently came back from a 5-month mission trip, and I think you came back with so many testimonies and stories, and I can't even imagine, the things that happened within those 5 months. But I do know that you kept an online blog and you kept your supporters updated through that, so I was able to read through some of that. I think the PEMCAST team as a whole thought it would be amazing to capture some of those stories, and we'd love to hear some of those stories today.
Yeah, I would love to share. So I went on what's called a discipleship training school with a missionary organization called Youth with a Mission, or YWAM. And typically the program lasts for 5 to 6 months. My program was for 5 months, where you spend 3 months at a base just training, learning more about the gospel, learning how to evangelize. And then you spend 2 months in what's called outreach, where they send you usually to a different country just to apply everything that you've learned. And so my training took place in Chico, California, which is in North Cali. And my outreach, actually, got to go to Romania and Ukraine for 2 months. So that was really, really cool. And the reason I wanted to go in the first place was, honestly, it was like more of a joke or a passing thought, if anything, because I had always wanted to go on long-term missions. But as I was nearing graduation, that was the last thing on my mind, especially because I think around November of 2021, right before I was getting ready to graduate, I had this really cool job opportunity come up. And after a couple of interviews, I really, really thought, and I was pretty sure I was going to get the job. And so I remember praying, just during one of my nightly prayers, just kind of joking to God, hey, God, since I'm so sure I will get the job, if I somehow don't get it, I will go on long-term missions. And, I just forgot that God really takes those promises seriously. And unfortunately, I did not get the job due to really unforeseen circumstances. And after just a couple of weeks of me kind of just being frustrated and also lamenting. Shout out to P Day's past sermon series. But yeah, just after lamenting for a period, I remembered my prayer to God, and I started to seriously look into long-term missions. And so I talked to Kristen just about, because she also went to YWAM, and I initially wanted to see if I could go to South Africa, but she was telling me that they weren't looking for a long-term missionary for the time being. And then she told me about YWAM. And so after looking into it, I decided that this was something I wanted to do. And after praying about it for a couple of months, I felt like God was pushing me into that direction. And so I applied and I got in. And that really just jump-started this whole journey, which honestly, I think started even before the 5 months of the whole discipleship training school. It started when I made that decision to apply.
That's pretty crazy, because I don't know that many people who does 6 years of studying, and makes that kind of promise to God, like, I'll go wherever you send me. I think 6 years, most people feel very deserving of, finding a job, getting into work and starting their career. So I can't imagine like how much faith that required to be like, oh, I didn't get into this job that I was asking God for, and to just even pause on your job search, right? Because it could have continued, but you decided like this whole alternative route. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, honestly, I'm so confused as to why I didn't just continue to look for jobs. But I think...
Well, what did your parents think?
They thought I was crazy. But I think they accepted kind of my decision after I told them this wasn't like a spur of the moment thing. This was something I had been praying about for like 2 or 3 months. And I felt like God was pushing me into this direction. And after I told them that and explained it, they were a lot more understanding, because I think I'm just blessed to have parents that are Christians that understand that it's not really us that really make these big decisions. It's God kind of pulling us into his calling. And so I was really glad for that.
Yeah. I love that you kind of took a non-traditional route even after graduating, and you took advantage of that time. And, I think it takes up a lot of courage to kind of follow something that hasn't been done before. But yeah, mad props for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, okay. So you find out about this YWAM program and you want to go. And then, so I'm sure from that, you have to now think about logistics and fundraising. And what was that whole process like?
Since I was so set on going, I was determined to pay off however much I need to raise from my own, just using my credit card. And honestly, at the beginning, I kind of thought that that's what God wanted me to do, because coincidentally, my credit card max limit was, I think, 6,000 or something. And then the amount we needed to raise to go to YWAM was $7,000. So I was like, oh, I can just raise up, 1,000, which is not too difficult. And then I'll just put the rest on my bank credit card. And then as I was like kind of going through the fundraising process, I think something that God put on my heart was that was not the right way to fundraise, because though I think the whole point of fundraising is so that you can bring your community into the calling that God has given you, so that even if it's not financially supporting, you should have a community that is supporting you through prayer. I think that is very important. And God kind of put that on my heart, and he was trying to tell me that this isn't a mission, this isn't something I have to do on my own, or I should do on my own. And he reminded me of that through just a lot of different ways, where one time a family friend of mine, she gathered a bunch of other close family friends that I had grew up with, and we all just had like a prayer meeting for me. And I honestly didn't think a lot of people would come, but like the whole house was packed that day. And I was just so blessed, because I was just reminded of my time here in New Jersey and the friends and the bonds that I've created, and just the support that I had. And I think that was like probably the best moment during my fundraising, just being reminded that even if I'm not connected with them now, I still have a family that loves me and supports me. And that's really what Christianity is about in general, where brothers and sisters coming together to support one another and each other's callings. And I think just seeing that was a really heartfelt and a warm reminder for me, because at that time as well, I think I was going through just struggles with community and finding my place. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that that you made about fundraising being not only about us and, kind of fulfilling that limit that we need to reach, but, garnering community around this cause and letting them be a part of it. Because I think when we think of finances and fundraising, and it automatically brings like this pressure and this kind of stress that we build around it. And sometimes we feel like we can kind of take care of it ourselves. But I think even in that process, it like stretches our faith. So yeah, I think that's a great reminder for anyone going on missions or having to fundraise, right? I'm assuming, God provided in a lot of different ways that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, so another thing that I did was I offered to babysit for a lot of the PEM families.
Oh, you did, yeah.
And honestly, that was so cool because I don't really know the PEM children as well as I would have wanted to. And so this was like a great opportunity for me to interact with them and play with them, get to know their character, and just kind of to shower them with love. And it was so fun, every moment of it, because every PEM family is so different and their children love so many different things. So I got to do so many different things with them that catered to them specifically. And I think it was really nice also just seeing the parents and how they live their lives as just Christians as well. I think it was very inspiring to see. And yeah, it was really cool.
Nice. Babysitting is a great idea. I feel like there's so many creative ways to fundraise now.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we send you out as a church and you get to your YWAM base, which is in California that you mentioned. What was that whole training, discipleship? Like, what was that whole process like? And I'm sure you met a lot of friends or, new leaders there.
I think getting to California was a whole new experience for me because we were located in Northern California, and it's predominantly Caucasian, the people there. And it was like my first time not being with other Asian people. And because, even as my family moved around a lot, we were always just within Korean American communities. So it was my first time being amongst people that were not Korean Americans, that were not Asian. And I felt very uncomfortable at first because my experience, just very honestly, with other Caucasian people have always been sort of negative because, I've had just not so fun experiences, especially when I lived in the South, like Atlanta, Georgia, and Tennessee. And so being like only one of the few Asians in the community again, it was a little nerve-wracking for me. But I think I soon realized that like God's people are not dependent on like your race or your color or the cultures you grew up in. Like at the core of it all, if you're a Christian, then you all have that same sort of love for each other. And after I realized that I fit in very well, and they became like a family to me there as well. And so I think that part, God really helped to ease my fears and concerns and just show me like the true heart of other people. And it really opened my heart to just humans in general, I think, because I can tend to be closed off and more reserved and more cynical. And so that was really nice. And then in terms of the actual materials that we learned, there were parts that I really, really enjoyed where it was like more of the academic parts, because I think I'm more academically inclined. So we would like dig deeper into the Bible and learn about like the character and nature of God, or like just how to hear God's voice, things like that. And I would love that. And then there were also more practical things where we would every week go out into like the college campuses or to parks and like worship or just spread the gospel and just talk to random strangers. And that part was a little harder for me because it was not something I'm used to. And that was very hard for me to get adjusted to at first, because going up to random people and telling them about Jesus is very strange to think about and even do.
I had a very similar experience in South Africa as well. Sort of like the street evangelism was a very like foreign concept to me. So I could understand like having to step out of your comfort zone in those areas. It's very frightening.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of like stories or things that you would like to share that happened during this discipleship time? Can you remind me how long this discipleship training program was?
Yeah, it was for 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
So that's a long time to bond and to really get to know the people.
Yeah.
And to like soak in all of this new information that you're learning. Like any cool stories or personal testimonies?
Yeah, I can share a couple. So I can first talk about hearing God's voice, because that was one of the lecture topics. And I think that was the first time I ever heard of that concept, where they really told us or encouraged us to be reminded that God speaks to every one of his children, and that we just each hear him in different ways. And for me, that was really important, because for me, I always thought, you know, you have to be someone special to hear God's voice, and that I was not worthy to hear his voice, or since I've never heard it before, like I would never hear it. But I think they just shifted my perspective to understand that God has been speaking to me this entire time, and I just haven't been understanding what he has been saying. I think I love the analogy they shared, where hearing God's voice is sort of like when you're in a group full of people and someone turns off the light and they ask you to identify a stranger's voice, and it'd be very difficult for you. But then if they asked you to identify like a close friend or a family member, then you would be able to identify it right away because you know them so well. And they're telling us how the more you get to know God, and the easier it is for you to hear his voice. And I think after understanding that, I start to want to get to know him more. And because of that desire, and the more I got to know him, the better I felt like I heard his voice. And some cool examples is, so one time we were interceding, doing an intercessory prayer night for Ukraine because of the war going on. And this was before we even had the option to go to Ukraine. So I had no clue I was going to go there. And during one of the prayers, I just had an image of a sailor, like a young sailor, and someone else next to me as we were sharing said he had an image of like a ship bringing in supplies or help, right? I don't know the geography of Ukraine. I didn't even know they had a sea next to it. And so this was all weird to me. I was like, okay, weird. And then I kind of forgot about it. So when I went to Ukraine, our original destination was going to be only in Ternopil, which is to the west of Ukraine. And then randomly, as you were doing ministry, so one of the leaders approached us and said, hey, do you want to spend a week in Odessa, which happened to be one of the coastal cities right next to the sea, where we would be able to bring a lot of help and humanitarian aid to the people there. And that sort of prayer came back to me, and I was like, whoa, this is too weird to be a coincidence. And I think just those small moments where it's kind of like God was speaking into my life, and he was bringing that into fruition after he told me what was going to happen. And then another moment where something similar happened was during one of our off days, we got to go hiking. And when our driver actually lost the keys to the car as we were hiking. And we had hiked for about like over an hour at this point. And we were pretty frantic at first. We were like, should we retrace our whole footsteps? We have no clue where it would have fallen. And we were all getting very worried. But then one of us was like, hey, we should just try to pray and ask God, let's see where the keys are. And a lot of us kind of felt like God was telling us to just go back to the car and that it would be there. And so personally for me, I was like, this is crazy. Like, why are we not looking for these keys? Why are we just going back? So we ended up going back and trusting in what we felt like God was telling us. And to our surprise, the keys were literally on top of the car with a note that said, hey, I found these keys on the side of the on the side of the trail, and I just wanted to put them here. And if they're not yours, it's I'm sorry, but yeah. And then we were all like crazy. In awe, like in shock, like what the heck is going on? And I think we were all just really amazed to see, like, even in the little things where you're looking for lost keys, God is still there with you, and he will speak to you, and he will answer your prayers.
Dang, how metaphorical. Lost keys.
I think another really big testimony that I had was as I was learning how to evangelize and become more comfortable, I got to speak to this man who worked a hot dog stand on a college campus there. And he was actually the main person I would speak to every time we would go for about 4 weeks. And I got to really just witness to him and share a bit of my testimony. And honestly, I was really glad that he was there for me, because he was so receptive, and even though he was not a Christian and he had his own gripes with Christianity. He was always willing to listen and hear my own stories. And also it was a really good opportunity for me to just learn how to share my own faith in a way that can be receptive to others. And I think what really blessed me was as we were talking and getting to know one another, and as I got to share just a bit of my life every time I went, crazy things would happen little by little. So at first, there were not that many people. Actually, one thing that I noticed was whenever I first approached him, he didn't have as many customers. And then as he would start talking, more and more customers would come. And eventually, by the time the conversation was over, he would be out of hot dogs. And okay, so I was like, oh, so the first 2 times I was like, okay, maybe I'm going at the same time. So, and maybe that time's like a rush hour for the classes. So I went at a different time. Same thing happened for the next 2 times. And at some point I was like, this is kind of weird because it was just very odd just to see that he was doing so well. Because at the very last week that I went, he actually had enough money to upgrade a lot of his materials.
Wow.
And he was looking a lot happier because he was just doing well financially. I thought it was just very coincidental and very weird. But anyways, but then another thing that happened was, so he actually told me he had cancer, and every time I would meet up with him, I would pray. And at the very last meeting, he actually was telling me that the cancer was actually going back into remission. And I think just hearing that really brought me a lot of joy and just really helped me to believe in the power of healing and just the power that prayer has. And I think the last big blessing regarding the gentleman that I met was that through the large amount of customers that came every time we would meet up, I actually got to talk to a lot of the college students there as well and kind of share my testimony and also just share the gospel to them as well. And so it became kind of like me speaking to the hot dog man and also me speaking to dozens of other college students at the same time. And it was just really cool for me to just be in the college atmosphere again, buying hot dogs for people and just speaking truth into their lives. And overall, I think I was just very blessed by that experience. Yeah.
Did you feel like before missions, you had any sort of fear of talking to strangers or evangelizing or
I would
just
say
speaking in general?
I would never have done that before. And I think it wasn't, I think the very first day we went to evangelize, I couldn't talk to anyone. It wasn't until I walked up into a cafe and forcibly just bought a drink. And then as the cashier was telling me how much I needed to pay, I was asked very quietly, hey, he's anything I can pray for you about, and very quietly. And then she was like, oh yeah, sure. Just, about my day. And and then I prayed a very quick prayer and then I left. And after that, I was like, you know what? That wasn't too bad, She didn't kick me out of the store. No, she didn't smear my face, I was like, maybe I can do a little more. Wow. And so, little by little, I started kind of with that where I would just approach people, ask how they're doing and ask if there was anything I could pray for. And then that eventually led to just me being more comfortable sharing about my faith as a Christian and then digging deeper into what they believed in and things like that.
Wow. That's crazy. And the whole healing story about the hot dog stand and everything. It must have been very encouraging for you to witness those things happen. So did you feel ready and equipped and excited? Because we know that your missions trip, the majority of that was in Ukraine. First of all, I'd love for you to share with us sort of the whole vision trip around going to Ukraine, or I guess YWAM's vision about Ukraine and their heart for it, and sort of how you rallied into kind of, supporting that mission site. And if you'd like to just start sharing, how that whole part of your mission trip was like.
It's actually crazy that you ask about the vision casting because the reason, because normally every YWAM base, they send out missionaries to different locations based off of that base is connections to the other missionaries around the world. And so for us, we actually weren't going to go to Ukraine in the first place. No one had any connections there. But one of the leader's son had a dream from God telling him to go to Ukraine. And the leader had so much faith that she believed and she really pushed to go into Ukraine. And because of like her son's vision and his dream, this whole trip like began. And the main reason we wanted to go was because we had heard that the staff in Ukraine were just being overworked because ever since the war had started, so it had been maybe like 6 months since the war had started, they had not been home to like their children and their wives because they had pretty much been living on the base, trying to feed the refugees, give them rest and minister to them. And we just wanted to go to just relieve some of the work that they were doing, maybe cook for the refugees or just to be there for them and kind of just lift up any sort of burden that the staff there were having, because we knew that realistically we wouldn't be able to do anything substantial. Like we weren't going to save the people from the war, you know, that's not our job. But our main vision was to go in there and kind of just let the staff, you know, meet up with their families and just find rest, however many weeks that we could be there for them. And that was our biggest goal, really. Yeah.
Wow. So what was it like? What was it like being there? I know you're probably like all hands on deck, right? With serving the people and the refugees. And were you any part of like rebuilding, or was it more like just hospitality towards the people?
I think since our main mindset was to really just help relieve any burdens that they had, we went to both Romania and Ukraine. We first entered into Romania because you can't fly directly into Ukraine, and we spent a week there. And the main thing we did there was they had like 100 refugees, so we had to feed them every day. We had to cook dinner, and then we did some like house projects on the side, like helping them build and clean. But for the most part, that was pretty much what we did. And I think that was a really big blessing for them because they were so short-staffed. Just us being there to cook was really, really big. And I think there I got to kind of understand just the life of a refugee a lot better. Because even though I've been on Georgia missions where we work with refugee children, I think the children, a lot of the times, we're just there to play with them. We're not here, we don't really hear their stories, or we don't understand, because I feel like children have a different perspective than adults. And so I got to speak with adult refugees, and I think I got to really see how hard it was to live as a refugee in a foreign country. Because even though Romania and Ukraine bordered each other, the Ukrainians and the Romanian languages are very, very different, and they don't speak each other's languages at all. And so a lot of the Ukrainian refugees felt very alone and isolated there. They were having difficulty finding jobs. They were even having difficulty going out to get groceries because they didn't understand the language. And so I think just hearing that and just being able to speak to them about their struggles and also feed them was just a really big blessing, not only to us, but also to them. And so that was really nice. And then after a week, we got to actually drive into Ukraine. It was like a 12-hour drive. And like the moment we crossed the border, there was like an atmosphere change. And there were like multiple members of our team also felt it. It was like a spiritual heaviness where, you know, in Romania, it was much, much lighter. People were a lot happier. But you could just tell as soon as we crossed the border that things were different. And that this was like a place of actual war, and there was a lot of death. And I just felt very, very sad for like the first couple of days. I think it just weighed on us a lot more than we had thought, because maybe it was like a subtle thing where, you know, you could just see, you know, everyone around us, they were just felt a lot more downtrodden, and there were just not a lot of people around in general as well, I think. But the ministry we did there was very similar to what we did in Romania, where we would give out food packages to the refugees in the area. And we got to do a lot more children's ministries, where we would go to orphanages, do like traditional VBS stuff, where we would do crafts, we would just do dances with them. And then something really cool that we did was we got to go to a sanatorium where they brought in wounded soldiers from the front lines, and they were kind of just resting and recuperating. And we were able to give like a short message. So this was actually one of the testimonies I wanted to share, where I was supposed to lead like a couple of Christmas songs, but they actually forgot to bring me a guitar. And I have never sang a cappella before in my life. I've honestly never sang in public in my life. And for some reason, when they asked me if I could still sing, I was just said yes. I don't know why I said yes. To this day, I'm still kind of confused. But since I said yes, I knew I couldn't back down. And so I was very nervous because right before I went, there was a legit a cappella group that went on before me. And they actually spoke Ukrainian. So they sang Ukrainian songs. They were so good. And I was like, why am I going on after these people? I would be singing, because the big thing in Ukraine is they actually not a lot of people know English. So I'd be singing songs that they don't understand. And so in the end, I just was like, you know what? Actually, no, I think I was still doubting myself even before I went up. But as soon as I went up, all fear kind of went away. And I was able to sing a couple of Christmas songs. And, I don't know whether they were a blessing or not, but I would like to think that my yes to like me obeying God provided some sort of blessing to the soldiers. But I think for me, it was just really good to see that when it came down to it, I would still be able to say yes no matter how uncomfortable the situation was. So that was kind of like the biggest takeaway that I had. But yeah, that was, I think, one of the craziest things that I've ever done. I don't think I would ever do it again, honestly. It was very weird. Yeah. And another thing that we did was we went to Odessa, as I was talking about. It's like a coastal city. And that was actually quite close to the actual fighting. And that was, like, the whole process of even going there was very scary for me too, because we were only 2 hours from the front lines. And when we arrived there, it was like another atmosphere where in Ternopil, where we were, you could kind of see like semblance of, normal living where people would go to work, you would see people walking the streets. But here in Odessa, it was like a ghost town. And the city is supposed to be pretty much the Miami of Ukraine, where it's supposed to be very popular. A lot of people go there on holidays. But seeing like just rows of empty cars and these like really big buildings and malls with no one inside them filled me with just a lot of sorrow, just because of just the suffering that people were going through. And the work we did there was also very similar, where we would feed a lot of the refugees. This was actually with a different missionary organization, and they fed so many refugees. It was like over 500 refugees in one day. And that was really a big blessing to be a part of that, just to help distribute food. And then we also got to be a part of kind of the youth group that they do there and the children's ministry, because it was around Christmas time. We got to give away, what are those called? The shoe boxes with the gifts. I think it's called Samaritan's Purse, something like that, yeah. But anyways, we got to give away Christmas gifts to the kids there and the refugees. And that was also when I also hurt my back, which was, I think, another big testimony for me, where I didn't know this until I came back, but I have a small right-sided scoliosis. And because of the way I was lifting things in Odessa, I hurt it very badly to the point where I had a very bad back spasm. And since I didn't know like what was going on, I thought I was completely healthy. I thought I had somehow broken my back. I don't know why, but the pain was very, very real, and I couldn't stand, lie down, walk without like immense pain. And at some point, I realized that after a couple of days, my legs were becoming a lot weaker and they were becoming numb. And so I think overall, I was just very afraid of what would happen. And I remember that night we went to like a worship night, and the main message was about Abraham and how he sacrificed Isaac, even though he was like the son that God had promised him. And the sermon was kind of about how Abraham's faith never wavered, even though he was told to sacrifice his the thing that God had given him. And I think as I was just kind of meditating on that, the God posed a question to me where he was like, how much are you willing to give up for me? And that night, I kind of really thought very, very deeply about that question. Like, would I really, if God had asked me to give up like the use of my legs, or how much would I be willing to give up? And I think I never really knew the answer to that when I asked it before, but seeing how at that point in my life, it was a very real possibility in my head, I came to the conclusion that I genuinely would be able to continue to follow God faithfully, even if I had, somehow become paralyzed. And then immediately the day after, my back felt so much better. And it was honestly, I think, a miracle in that aspect where even though the pain wasn't gone, he gave me enough strength back into my body where I could finish out the remainder of my mission trip very well, and that I could do it with joy. And now I am very blessed to say I actually just finished going through PT this past week, and now,
Wow.
I'm doing a lot better.
Congrats.
Yeah,
So it sounds like obviously there were physical hurdles for you with, your back in pain, and then the emotional challenges, and then also being challenged to come out of your comfort zone and the ways you had to lead worship, etc. And I'm sure you've had some time to, process all of that. And I'm still sure you're processing the mission trip as well right now.
Yeah.
So kind of what was it like wrapping up, the trip and your transition back? How have you been feeling since then?
So after we spent about 4.5 weeks in Ukraine, we spent the remaining 3.5 in Romania. And I think entering and exiting Ukraine were both very, very different experiences, because after we left Ukraine, a lot of us felt all of a sudden very fatigued and like super, super, very tired. And we felt like we had run a marathon. And we had realized that for like the past month, we had kind of just been running on adrenaline, because I think for me personally, I didn't realize this, but I had been subconsciously just been hyper aware the entire time, because I didn't really know when the next time like a bombing would occur, or the next time the electricity would run out, or I didn't really know when I would be safe. And so I was never afraid, but I think subconsciously I was always just aware that there was something that could happen at any time. And so coming out of Ukraine, I could finally let go of like that adrenaline, and all of a sudden all of like the tiredness I was feeling just suddenly hit me at once, and that was why I felt so tired. But I think overall I was very, very glad that God brought us into like our last 3 weeks in Romania, because for me, I got to do a ministry that I personally love, which was children's ministry. And it was kind of like, even though it wasn't a vacation because you were still doing ministry, for me, it was a very, very good break, because I was doing something that I personally think I thrive at, because I love worshiping and dancing for children, making them laugh. And we got to go to different Roma villages. So they're pretty much called gypsies, but it's like a derogatory term. So they're called Roma people. But we went to different Roma villages and we got to interact with the children there. And I got to meet one village called Nemja. And I got to meet this amazing children's like leader. Her name is Manuela. She reminded me of like a grandma Pidai. It was actually crazy. The way she commanded so much respect for the kids. These were the most well-behaved kids I've ever seen in my life. They were so polite. They listened to everything she said. And one of the times we went, it was her birthday, and the entire village kids came up to her and gave her gifts, showered her with love. Even some of the teenage boys went up and hugged her, and I was like, teenage boys don't do that. And I think for me, that was like one of the biggest blessings in Romania, just seeing her be such an amazing role model to these kids, because some of the staff at YWAM in Romania that we met came from that village and was under her as a kid, and they went into YWAM because of her and because of like kind of the upbringing she showed. And I was just super blessed just to see like the respect she commanded from all the kids. And I think for me, I was really happy to have spent the last couple of weeks there to kind of process what I'd been going through in Ukraine and kind of de-stress. Yeah, so it was really nice, honestly. I was really, really glad and thankful to God for allowing me this time just to be present in like the joy of children's ministry.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, because, when our team went to South Africa, even though they also speak a totally different language there and they also understand English, we found that there are some, universal praise songs that they recognize, like God is good, and things that we kind of were able to, connect with. Were there any like phrases or parts of like the Christian culture there that there was any similarity or?
No, unfortunately not. In Ukraine, especially since they don't speak English, there were not that many songs that. Actually, no, they did have popular English songs that they translated to Ukrainian, but since they don't speak English, it was hard for me to worship or lead worship in English.
So everything felt very foreign.
Yeah, I think that was like the biggest barrier on missions in general was the language. Like going into a store and like buying like toothpaste was so difficult. I was like, how?
Do you use like charades?
Yeah, you have
gestures?
to because like Google Translate sometimes gets it wrong. And yeah, I didn't realize how hard it was to get something
Did you
so
have like
simple.
a little mini dictionary?
No, I always had to
Translate
use my
everything?
phone. But
Google Translate.
yeah, so that was like a very different experience for me, but I was glad I got to experience it and understand like the difficulties of language.
Right.
But also one thing I really loved about like not knowing the language was learning worship songs in their language. I got to experience the joy of singing in another language and singing to God in another language. For me, what I loved about it was as I was singing, because I feel like if you're singing in a language that's foreign to you, which English was foreign to them, you can't really be genuine in your worship at times. And so when I learned these languages in their language and they got to sing it, I got to see their genuine worship. And I think that was really, really awesome for me just to be a witness to. And that brought me so much joy, just being able to be a blessing to them by singing in their own language. So that was really cool. Yeah.
I have very similar experiences of just being so like in awe and convicted by worship when I go on missions, knowing that just music and worshiping God is like this universal feeling and this offering that we can do. So I totally resonate with that feeling. Yeah. So did you fly back directly from Romania or did you go back to your training site and then fly back home?
So we spent a week back in California, kind of debriefing because we weren't the only people there that went to Romania and Ukraine. There were actually, so in my program, it's called the Crossroads program. There were about 10 of us, and then we kind of split off to go to different places. And then running alongside that program was a family DTS program where they had like 12 families and like 30 kids. And they also went to different places. So we would all come back together and we would all kind of share our own experiences and our testimonies. And we got to just be together again. And honestly, that was really cool for me too, because since there were so many kids there, I got to know a lot of them. And there were a lot of babies, like infants. And I think that was the first time I realized how fast kids grow within like even the span of 2 months, because we had only been gone for like 2 months. And like this one little baby, she was like 6 months old. She could barely like stand up straight without falling over. But now she could crawl. And I was like, what the heck is going on? This is awesome to see. And yeah, it was just cool just to see everyone, see how much they had grown within the past 2 months and just listening to their stories, because we all went to different places. Like we went to Thailand, Madagascar, Mexico. So it was really nice.
So you mentioned in the beginning of our meeting that you actually journaled throughout your whole time there.
Yeah.
And you brought something today.
Yes, I brought my journal. It's a Winnie the Pooh journal. It's very cute. And so the reason I wanted to bring it was because when I came back, I realized, or I read through some of the earlier entries, and something that I had written was like a letter to God about kind of my fears and doubts, and also some things I wanted to work on or some things that I was scared of. And so after I wrote them, I didn't think about it again, And coming back, I read it again and I realized how much God has blessed me and how much He listens to me and He hears my worries and my doubts, and that He's always been faithful to me and how well He has answered these prayers. And so I guess I can read the letter. So it's from September 11th. It says, "Dear God, you've brought me so far out of my comfort zone, and yet have shown me such love and grace. I'm scared and worried that I will not be bold enough to proclaim your word and your gospel. I'm doubtful that I can build meaningful connections with my community here. I feel so out of place and alienated, to no fault of anyone here. I pray that you would break down any prejudices and judgmental thoughts I would have, and that you would open up my heart to love on my family here at YWAM. I also am worried that my jaded heart and blunt mouth will hurt those around me. I pray for healing and a softening of my heart and heart. My hopes are that God will help me live out my faith amongst my peers instead of a solely individualistic relationship with God. I also am hopeful that God will speak to me and light up a path for my future career. I also know that He will revive my dead spirit and provide me with the fire for when I come back. I love God with my whole being, and I pray that I can share this love with those around me. Your son who loves you, Heymin. And then some of the, things I wanted to work on was mass evangelism, because I have a difficult time sharing the gospel to strangers because I enjoy building relationships before speaking about the gospel. My fear of rejection and fear of criticism often keeps me from bringing up the Bible if I don't know someone very well. I would like to be bold and not be afraid to tell others of the love Jesus has for them. And then something that I wanted to do, like a tangible outcome, was I wanted to preach the gospel to 5 strangers and lead a worship session. The first is due to my answer to the first question, and the second is because I've always loved worshiping but felt inadequately equipped to lead. I would like to worship regardless of my skill level freely. And to my surprise, God answered those, like especially the tangible outcomes, in such a big way, because before I left to Ukraine, I didn't advertise that I knew how to play any instruments. I kind of just worshiped on my own. But, after our teams were set on who was going where, we realized that no one really knew how to play instruments or worship in general. And they had asked me, and I felt God pushing me to say yes. And I was super, super glad that I did, because it really pushed me out of the comfort zone, because I was forced to lead worship in front of others. And I think that really helped me to be more comfortable worshiping in general and not being ashamed of, how I sound. And in terms of evangelism too, I think God has really pushed me out of my comfort zone as well, just hearing or allowing me to become more bold. I think a great example is when I was leaving to go home, in the airport, one of the first things I asked God was, hey, if there's someone you want to highlight in the airport that you want me to speak to, I would love to speak to them. And, first things first, I would never ask that question before. It's something I would never do. And so I was waiting in the airport, nothing really happened. And then as I got on the plane, I realized the person next to me was a Korean ajumma, like a Korean lady. And we got to speaking in Korean, and I got to share about my trip and just about church and share the gospel. And really, she was really encouraged just to hear my story. And she was talking about her own journey with her faith and how she was now encouraged to go back to church because of me. And I think just little things like that, where I've become a lot more comfortable with my own testimony and what God has done in my life, and finding a joy sharing it with others has really just been a big impact for me.
So right now, you mentioned that you are job searching, you kind of, adjusting back to being home and getting back to work. Do you have any hopes of, ever either going back to YWAM or going on missions in general? I'm sure God has opened up so much of, the joy of going on missions through this trip. What does missions look like for you in the future?
I think for me, in the current moment, God has called me to be here at home. In that week where I was in California, after we had come back to debrief, I really felt God was pushing me to go home because He wanted me to focus on family. I think my whole trip kind of made me realize that I had been distanced from my siblings especially, and they are both going through, their own struggles with faith, and I couldn't be there for them because I really didn't have a relationship with them to begin with. And I think God was really pushing me to come back and just to invest in my family for the first time, because I think for most of my life, my priority has been God, and then friends, and then school, and then family, or God, friends, family, and then school. Family had never been as high on the priority list. And I really came back with kind of just a desire to bring, unity within my family, just under God especially. And so that has been my primary focus. I feel like my brother is in high school, he's a senior, so I get to hang out with him once a week. We currently are watching a show right now, but we get to talk about life because he's 8 years younger than me, so it's hard at times just to connect with him, kind of understand what he is going through. And because I see him a lot more just like as a son more than like a brother. But it has been nice getting to know him as like a person, as like a friend. And I also try to cook cook dinner for my family. I don't cook my family, PSA. I try to cook dinner for my family every week as well. And that has also been really cool because every week I try to think of something unique that I can do afterwards. And I also cook with my brother as well. So that has been really fun because both of us have never cooked before. Honestly, I think we both kind of suck. But it has been really nice just to learn how to cook and fail together and to grow together and also spend time with as a family. My parents have also just been really enjoying just me trying to unify our family, and they really appreciate like me trying, which is nice.
Yeah, that's so beautiful that you can really highlight your family and see that as like something that you really want to like pour out to and invest in at this time. And honestly, you just shared so many great things with us today. I'm personally so encouraged. I'm sure there's so many more, rich stories that you have that you experienced at missions. But yeah, I'm just personally very blessed to, know someone that had that confidence to like trailblaze ahead, and do something that, is scary. But I think at the end, we reap so much fruit out of our obedience. So yeah, with all that said, is there anything else that you'd like to just share with our church? I know even you being back, you're still very much involved. And I know you shared that you're in welcoming committee. I assume you're part of a house church?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I think something I wanted to highlight was just how supportive like PEM as a church has been. I think I mentioned it a little before, but I think I've always struggled just with community and finding my place and finding where I belong. But this whole trip has made me realize just how loving and caring PEM is for its own members and for its family. And like me writing the blog has been such a big blessing because, I can tend to be pretty private and I don't really share a lot with other people. But this blog was kind of like me bearing my heart during missions and how I felt, and just hearing everyone's feedback and just listening to other people within the congregation, just being blessed by my testimonies during my trip through my blog has been really, really awesome for me to hear, because it just felt like I had a family back at home that truly cared and that truly loved me. And I don't think I would have been able to like go on my missions without, PEM as a church. So I'm very, very thankful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to add that I enjoyed reading your blog a lot as well, and feel like you touched on a lot of the stories that I was able to read through your website. And I love that you journal. I'm a huge proponent of journaling, especially when you get to like see and look back, at all the prayers that God has answered. And it really like materializes it, like the blessings and the way that he provides. So love that. And yeah, is there, I guess, a way that as a community we can keep you covered in prayer?
I think that I would still be able to serve wholeheartedly as I did on my mission trip, that I wouldn't get too comfortable with just being at home, and that I'll just be reminded that even here there's still so much to be done, and that there's still people that are seeking the gospel and just want to be understood and loved.
We'll definitely be praying that over you. And personally, you are just, I think, a very solid leader in our church. And I'm really thankful that there are men of God that we can, look up to and learn from. And so how can, maybe people reach out to you or get connected with you if they want to get to know you more?
They could probably just, come up to me at church or just message me. I feel like I don't really do much throughout the week because I'm still hunting for jobs. So I'm usually pretty free. Yeah, really, that's pretty much the best way. You can just walk up to me and talk.
Walk up to the guy with glasses,
Yeah,
long curly hair. Or they can reach out to you by Facebook or whatever socials, right?
Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty open and pretty welcoming, I would say. I think that can be a bit of a problem sometimes. I can give a bit of a PSA here, I guess, about a recent incident that happened because I was just too welcoming, just me being so kind. So recently I was a victim of identity theft.
What?
So this is a bit of like a...
this turn.
Yeah, I wanted to end off with this juicy story, I guess, just so,
Yes, please share.
my shortcomings can be taken as a word of caution to others so they don't fall for it. Someone called me a couple weeks, like 2 weeks ago at this point. They were saying that they're from the Immigration and Customs Office, and they said, my identity had been compromised. Someone had used my passport. And so I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh, shoot, it's kind of a big deal. And they led me to the, so they actually took very, very, like the right steps to kind of prove that they weren't a scam, but they 100% were a scam. So they first brought me to the official Immigration and Customs website. It's a .gov website, and it was actually legit. And they asked me to look up the phone number.
Please don't tell me you gave away your social security.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay. We'll get to that. But pretty much, they told me to confirm that the caller ID that they were calling me from is the same as the Immigration and Customs agency number. And I was like, okay, sure, it matches up. And so they're like, okay, so now we're not a scam. And then they led me to the actual like governmental forms that you need to fill out if your identity does get compromised. And they were walking me through the steps. And as that was going on, another person calls me, and an immigration officer is like, hey, so who's calling you? Can you look up their number? And so I look up the number on Google, and it turns out it's like my local police department. And so he was like, okay, you can put me on hold and answer that phone call. So I answer it. There's sirens going off in the background. And this guy's like, hey, are you Heymin? There's a search warrant out for your arrest right now. Someone has compromised your identity. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's kind of crazy. This immigration officer just called me with the exact same info.
Kind of crazy. That's wild.
I know. And so I was like, oh dang, like, what do I do? So he was like, just follow whatever the immigration officer wants you to do, but you have 15 minutes to do it, or we're going to come get you. And I was like, what the heck? Okay. And so I continued to fill out the form. And then they tell me that I have to pay an immigration bond, which is like a set sum of money. And the cop calls me again, and he's like, okay, so you need to pay this amount of money, or else we're going to come get you in like 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes to do this. And then, so at this point, I'm just all in, bro. They got me good. They got me good at this point. And so I'm like, okay, sure, I'll pay. I don't want to get arrested. And then they tell me that, you can wire the money through Zelle. So I was like, okay, sure. But then it turned out that, I just got out of college. I don't have money. So I didn't have the money they needed in my bank account. So the Zelle didn't go through. So they're like, oh, shoot, can you just go get a Target gift card and use your credit card to buy us the amount that we need? So at this point, I was like, since I was all in already, I really just trusted them. And I went out to Targets, got them a gift card, and I gave them not only the Target gift card, like ID and stuff. I also gave them my credit card because they're like, we kind of need proof. And I gave them that, and I also showed them my driver's license. And at that point, though, finally, I listened to the alarm bells in my head, and I was like, this ain't right. And so I hung up, and I actually looked up on the local PD's website, like the name of the officer who was calling me, and he didn't exist. And so at that point, I was like, I got screwed over. So I called the actual local PD, and I was like, yeah, this guy doesn't exist, bro. So I had to go in and file like an identity theft, some forms, and then I had to report to the credit bureaus. So thankfully, everything has been resolved. I mean,
thankfully.
Yeah, I didn't get my money back, but money can be recovered, my identity. cannot if it's stolen.
That's crazy.
So this is to everyone out there, don't get fooled like I did, please.
So they were playing fake siren noises
Yes,
in
they
the
did.
background.
It was
Some
ins-
YouTube video.
Yeah, they were very, very good.
I mean, that would have kind of, yeah.
I got
I'd have fallen for that
I got
too.
got.
Wow, Heymin. Well, yeah, thank God you didn't give away more than I hope you didn't give away. And yes, please don't give out personal information.
Yeah, see, this is what you get for being too welcoming, Just
Yeah, it can be welcoming to an extent.
yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm still processing that story, but thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes.
Yes, you're just full of so many fun stories.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Heymin, for joining us on our podcast today. We really appreciate your time and you sharing, all these crazy and fun stories. Anyone who's listening, I hope that you were blessed, and feel free to reach out to Heymin. Don't ask for his personal information, but maybe you guys can connect and have a conversation. And, since you don't mind giving advice, maybe you can also, share advice with people who are interested in missions or even, just this life stage, this crazy life stage where anything can happen, right? Mm-hmm. Anything can happen after graduation, after coming back from missions, after getting a weird phone call.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you.
And hope everyone else enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's what